Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Java Graphics. Today we're going to be showing you how to add images to your Java graphical program. Now if you've missed any of the prior videos in the graphical series, I'm going to put a link to the first video in the description below so you can catch up on all the stuff you missed. For today, we're going to actually start by creating an image in a graphical or image editor. Then we're going to head over to NetBeans and see how we actually include that image in our program. If you want to learn Java programming, or just programming in general, subscribe to this channel. We put out a lot of videos that range from beginner topics to more advanced programming concepts. Also, please like this video, share it with a friend, and write a comment as well. It goes a long way to help promote a channel like this. Now, let's get back to the video. So here we are in Corel Draw, and I'm going to just draw a basic character out of standard shapes, nothing crazy. We're going to draw a circle. So let's draw a circle here, and we'll make this like the head. I don't know, we'll just make it however big we want. All right, and we moved it into the middle of the screen. Let's just put a color on it. So how about we go with yellow? That looks good. Let's draw a little eye. We'll put the eye over here. Let's make the eye, we'll make the eye white. There we go, looks good. Let's put a little mouth. Let's draw a mouth. We'll draw it with a 3-point curve. And we'll kind of curve it a little bit like that. And now we'll move it into position and resize it. All right, there we go. And now let's draw our front and back legs. We'll just make those basic ovals. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. We'll make a leg like that. Okay, there's the leg. Let's give it a color. How about we just give it blue, a darker blue. And let's actually make 2 legs. So I'm going to copy and paste that. Let me copy and paste that. And now we have 2 legs. Let's move the other leg back a little bit. So why don't we move it back right around there, just back a little bit. And let's angle them. So let's take the front leg and we will, well, let's see, the front leg should be in front of the back leg. There you go. And we'll take the front leg and we'll angle it, I don't know, let's just try 20 degrees. Let's see, that looks good. All right, we'll take the back leg, we'll angle it negative 20 degrees or 340 degrees. There are the 2 legs. We got to put the back leg behind the head so it looks like it's behind the body. There we go. All right, and then let's draw a little arm. We'll draw it the same way. We'll use an oval. Let's draw an arm. There we go. Let's move it into position. Okay, there we go. We actually turned it on its side a little bit. Let's give it a little bit of an angle. So that looks like a better arm. Let's make it red. And there's our character. I think that looks pretty good. I mean, we'll animate and we'll make the legs move. We'll make the arm move. But for now, I think that's a good enough drawing. Let's save this guy. And there we go. All right. Now we're going to put him into NetBeans and see if we can make him appear on a frame and move him around the screen. So before we actually get to NetBeans, let's just take a look at our image and how it's going to look on the screen. So here's our image. Now you notice I have a rectangle drawn around it. That's because Java draws images as rectangles. So as with a normal rectangle, we have an XY position and it's the upper left point of the rectangle. And of course we have a width and a height. Now my image actually has a width of 120 and a height of 140. But because we don't know exactly how big our image is going to be on our frame, we're going to take the width and the height of 120 and 140 and multiply it by some scale factor. That way the image doesn't get distorted, but we can adjust the size of the image bigger or smaller as we need. Now, before we actually get to NetBeans, let's take a look at where we have to place this file. Now, inside your project folder, wherever you may have placed it, you're going to have a build directory and you're going to have a source directory. Inside the build directory, you're going to have a directory called classes. Now, it's possible that you may not see the build and the classes directory until you actually run your program. So you may have to go into NetBeans and just hit run once, and then it has the build and the classes directory. But you should see these at some point. Now, the image file will go into the classes directory under build. Now, I have had people tell me that they have not put the image file in this directory, that sometimes they just put it directly in the source directory. And if that works for them, great, but I have never had that work for me. So my recommendation is put it in the classes directory. So our image has already been placed in that directory. Let's go to NetBeans and use it. So here we are back in NetBeans. As you can see, we still have our paddle, we still have our ball, and we wrote code earlier in order to have the ball bouncing off the paddle and off the edges of the screen. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into our driver and we're going to modify the code. We're not going to need a ball, so we're going to get rid of all the code that deals with the ball. We don't need that. Let's get rid of the ball there. We'll get rid of the ball here. We're going to keep our class called ball, but we're not going to have the ball anywhere in this version of the program because we don't need it. But we'll keep the class ball just in case we want it later. And that should be good enough. So now if we run our program, you can see there's no more ball, but we still have our rectangle, okay? And we can move it around with the arrows, as you can see. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new class, and it's going to be similar to the rectangle. So let's actually create a class called player. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to basically just copy the code from rectangle. So let's do that. We'll go into player. We'll copy all this code. Of course, we do have to make a couple of changes. The name of the class is called player. Okay. We're not going to need left edge, right edge. Well, you know what? We may need that. So we're still going to have an X and a Y coordinate for our player. We're going to have a width and a height. We're going to have variables that keep track of whether the player is moving up, down, left, or right. We're going to have a left edge, right edge, basically the edges of the screen. And we're going to have a speed. How fast is the player moving? Now, something else that we're going to have is we're going to have a scale factor. This is going to indicate how big or small the player is going to be. And the other thing that we're going to need with this player is because we're dealing with images, we're going to need a variable that's an image icon. And we're going to need, let's call it player image icon. And we're also going to need a variable image. And we'll call it player image. And these are going to be used to actually get the images that we are going to use for this object. So we have to import that. We have to import this. Okay. Now, our constructor obviously has to be called player. And in our constructor, we're going to pass in the X and the Y position of our player. We're also going to pass in the left edge, the right edge, the top edge, and the bottom edge of our screen. And in our constructor, we set the X and the Y position to whatever we pass in. The width and the height, actually, the width is 120 and the height is 140. That was the actual image that I drew earlier in the video. We're going to start the player not moving at all. The left edge and right edge and the edges of the screen are set here. The speed of the player, that's fine. We'll keep it as 3. We'll see how that works. But then the scale factor. We'll set the scale factor for now to 1. Actually, what we really should do is we should set that up here. So the width is 120, the height is 140, and we're going to set the scale factor here to be 1, and we're going to just multiply the width by the scale factor. This way, we can change the scale factor at any time. We don't have to worry about changing the width and the height as well. So for example, if we change this to 2, the width and the height will be 240 and 280 respectively. But for now, we're going to just keep it as 1, and let's just see how big the player looks on the screen. So now in Draw Self, we're not going to draw a rectangle. We're not going to draw a rectangle. We're going to draw the actual image. Of course, we have to get the image first from the file, get the actual file. So what we're going to do in our constructor is we're going to say player image icon is going to be equal to a new image icon, and inside the parentheses, the parameters for this, we pass in player, which is the name of our class, dot get resource, and then in parentheses here, we're going to pass the name of our file, and I believe we called it player1.png. You can call it whatever we called it, that's what we should pass in here. This is the file that we placed in the build.classes directory. Now we have the image icon, we have to actually get the image. So what we're going to do is we're going to say player image equals, and it's going to be player image icon dot get image. And that actually gets the image that we can now draw. So in draw self, instead of drawing a rectangle, we're going to use another method on the graphics object called draw image. And the draw image method works as follows. We pass in the actual image, player image. We pass in the X and the Y position. We pass in the width and the height. And then the last parameter is beyond the scope of this video, but just suffice it to say that it's in most cases, I'd say 99% of the cases, it's going to be null. So you just pass in null here. So here are the parameters. This will draw our player. Now to move the player, I think we're going to keep the same code that we have here. We're going to, if we're moving to the right, it's going to be X plus speed plus the width is less than the right edge. Make sure we're not going off the edge of the screen. We're going to add speed to X. Of course, if we're moving left, we have to make sure we haven't moved off the screen, and so on and so forth. Now, arrow key press, same deal. We don't want to change that. The way that the rectangle used to move, that's the way the player is going to move. And we still have our get X, get Y, get width, get height. Who knows if we're going to need that? We're going to leave it in for now. So now what we're going to do is we're going to head over to our driver. And in our driver, we can close rectangle. In our driver, what we're going to do is we're going to actually create the player. Well, we've created a rectangle here. We don't want that anymore. We're going to create a player. Let's scroll down here, and we will have player equals new player. And we're going to pass in all the same stuff, right? The X and the Y position, and then the boundaries of our window, of our frame. In the paint component, we're going to say as long as player has been created, let the player draw itself. In the loop method, we're going to handle the processing, which is moving the player. And then, of course, in the key pressed, we have to pass in player instead of rectangle because we're no longer dealing with a rectangle. So let's do that. Key released, same deal. I'm going to actually copy and paste this. I should have done this a while ago, but that's okay. I like typing. Of course, when I don't like typing, I say that as well. All right, and I believe that's it. So now let's run our program, and we should see a little man on the screen. There you go. I can move him around with the arrows, as you can see. I think he's a little big. Okay, he can't go off the screen, as you can see. I'm trying to go off the screen. And let's go off to the right. Let's make sure he can't go off the screen that way. And oh, there we go. Can't go off the screen. Couple things. First thing is, I think he's a little too big. So let's go up to where we set the scale of our player in our player class. Scale 1. Let's make it scale 0.5. All right. Oh, well, scale can't be 0.5 because it's an integer. So we need to change it to a double. There we go. Now, as you can see, the width and the height are red because the width is an integer, but this is now a double. So let's cast this to an integer. And we'll cast this to an integer. There we go. That should do it. And if we run, let's see how our player looks. I think that looks a lot better. That's a better size for this. For this size window, I think that's perfect. And he still doesn't go off the screen. Great. So now there really is one thing that I'm not quite happy about. And that's when the player is moving to the left, he's moving backwards. So we really should technically flip the image around. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to have a variable. We're going to make a variable, Boolean, and it's going to be facing right. And of course, the player will start out facing right, so we'll make that true. And then in the draw self method, we're going to check to see if the player is facing right. And if they are, we're going to draw it the exact way we have it here. However, if we're not facing right, in order to draw the image as a mirror image, the only thing you really have to do is take W, the width, and multiply it by -1. And that's how we draw the image flipped around. And then when we're moving to the right, if we are moving the player to the right, not only do we want to increment the X by the value of speed, but we also want to set this variable. And of course, if we're moving left, we have to set the variable in the opposite, to its opposite value. And that should do it. So let's run it and see how it looks. And as you can see, we're moving to the right. It looks pretty good. Now if we move to the left, he switches around. But you notice there's a jump, right? You see that jump? And that's because the position of our character is the upper left position. That's the position where we're drawing the image. Now if we go to the left and we do a mirror image, meaning width is -1, the character's position is the upper right corner of our rectangle, because we start here and we have a width of negative, which goes this way. So that's a little bit of a problem. What we really want is we really want the position of this character to be moved over to the right a little bit. So all we're going to do is in our draw method, whenever we're drawing it, instead of drawing it at position X, we're going to draw it at position X plus width, which is going to move him over to where he should be. And let's check it out. There. And that looks much, much better. Okay? Much, much better. Okay, and let's just double check the edges, the boundaries, and there they are. All right, we now have a character. I hope you learned something from watching this video. Please remember to subscribe and share this video with others who are learning Java programming. Thanks for watching, and take care, everyone.